We are recording and live.
Thank you, Caitlin. Good evening, everyone. We'll be starting the meeting for January 27th, 2002 of the Newburyport Historical Commission in a mere moment. We're going to allow just a minute or two for applicants and attendees and commissioners, although I think nearly all the commissioners are already on board. In fact, I think, yeah, all but one. So we'll just allow another minute for that. I'm going to actually put myself in do not disturb here so we can all focus on tonight's work. And
Chair Richards, sorry, this
Yes.
is Andy. Just to interject, I believe that Malcolm has just joined us.
Excellent. Very good. Okay, well then we will get started. Yes, thank you, Andy. I see Malcolm in the list there of attendees. Sorry. Gotta hydrate. Okay, well, let's officially start tonight's meeting. Again, January 27th, 2002, Newburyport Historical Commission public meeting. We have one demolition delay application and a review of an amended demolition plan on the agenda, along with some other items of business, mostly around Community Preservation Act items. So let's get started. What I usually do is start with a roll call, make sure all our commissioners are here and have their audio working. So we have Malcolm Conrath. Can we hear you, Malcolm? Not hearing Malcolm. All right, work on that, Malcolm. See if you can unmute yourself on your end. I see you're unmuted on our end. How about Mark Syndrome?
I am here.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Peter McNamee?
Here.
Yep, I see you there. Thank you, Joe Morgan. And thank you, Joe. And this is the chair, Glenn Richards. Sorry, my throat's a little dry for some reason tonight, but we'll carry on. So if many of you have been in these Zoom meetings before, so I'll be very brief in reiterating the basic rules. The commissioners will have audio enabled, and one member of the public at a time will be unmuted if during a public hearing period. I'll explain how that works. Of course, applicants and or their representatives will also be unmuted during their presentations so that they may speak. If you wish to speak during a public comment period, what you do is raise your hand in the Zoom conference. There's a control for the Zoom application, whether you're on a tablet or an iPhone or a laptop, whatever, and you use the Zoom controls to raise your hand. So that way we know you want to speak. You'll be recognized by name, and you'll need to unmute yourself on your end as well as us. We will, Caitlin, who's running the meeting, will unmute you on our end, and then you'll be able to speak. And as usual for any public meeting, identify yourself by name and address, and then you can make your comment. If you're on a telephone, it's *9 to raise or lower your hand, and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. And if, again, don't forget to lower your hand once you've had your time. Okay, so on that, we'll move to the first item, which is a demolition delay application. Just very briefly reviewing for everyone on the call how that works. Is there actually there are 3 votes. The first one is to determine the historical significance of this particular structure. It can be either not historically significant, it can be historically significant and considered for preservation, or historically significant but not considered for preservation. That last category is fairly rare. Once that determination is made, if it's determined that it's historically significant and considered for preservation, if and only if that determination is made, we move on to have a public hearing of the proposed demolition plan, which ordinarily also includes not just demolition, but also whatever the rebuild design plans are. And after that, the board takes a vote on whether or not the structure is historically significant and preferably preserved. If it's preferably preserved, that means we don't want it to be demolished, and there's a 1-year demolition delay. However, since we'll have just reviewed the plans, or we'll be in the process of reviewing them, if we find the plans are satisfactory, we can take another vote to approve those plans. And if that vote passes, then the demolition delay is lifted and the applicant can proceed. I hope that's clear. It's the way I know it seems a little convoluted, but that's the best way I can figure to adhere to the audience and have it be as not the audience, the ordinance, and have it be clear to everyone involved. So with that, I think we have one Atkinson Street, Andrew Sidford. I'm not sure if that's the architect or the applicant. Is he unmuted, Caitlin?
Yes, I
Yes,
am.
yes.
Okay, and I see your hand is up, Andrew. You can, if you want, you can lower your hand. We recognize you and you're unmuted. So what we typically do, Andrew, if you've, I'm not sure, your name is unfamiliar to me, but maybe you've been with these before. What I would ask you to do is first focus on that first decision the board needs to make as to historical significance. And then if we vote that it is historically significant, we can go into more details as to your plans, okay?
Okay, my name's Andrew Sidford. I'm an architect here in town. I've been practicing here for 30 years. I've been before you many times, but I guess not recently. We have a small house on Atkinson Street. These are the existing photos. It was built sometime, we think, between 1800 and 1825. And really, it's a brief description, a brief summary. We are intending to, hoping to bump out the back and not change the front of the building at all. And most of the work that we're proposing, it's I think 90 square feet in the back and just extending the existing roof form over the rear addition. So
right, and just to clarify one thing, Mr. Sidford,
Yep.
you said you're not going to modify the front at all. And I assume when in this context, when you say front, you mean the facade that's facing the street?
correct.
Yeah, because in a way, the entry door is on that side, and there will be, and then we'll see that little notch sort of filled in according to your plan there. So,
Right.
So I guess it depends on what you want to call the front, but yeah, the street view will not appreciably
Good point.
change.
Yeah, the entrance is on the side. The most of what you see of the three faces of the building closer to the street, you won't
Right.
see much change at all. It's
Right.
really only in the back, and I don't think you'll notice any change in the back as well, because we're just extruding the original gable back. As I
Right.
said, it's a tiny house. So
Right.
hopefully that's clear.
Yeah, it is. All right, thank you. And it was interesting. It was in the data sheets, it was listed as a fairly early timber frame house. The form of it looks pretty early. It's probably had some revisions over the years and so on. But yeah, Caitlin is highlighting it there now.
Right.
So it's, kind of typical of many houses in the city of that era. I want to thank Atkinson, Joe, last week, Joe, referring to Joe Morgan, you shared with us some information on that Merrimack Street Historic District. This is right around that same district. Atkinson Street is a very small cross street that is quite near the place we looked at Plum Street. But anyway, so a lot of houses from that old era.
Yeah, this is the aerial view. And
Right.
you can, Atkinson is the street at the top.
Right.
It's a tiny house, a tiny lot, and it's
Right.
hemmed in pretty tight between a number of clearly much larger houses.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
you can see, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and that Atkinson Street is just that one block long. It's a
Right.
tiny street as well.
It's a street you can barely find.
Yeah.
And the proposed work from the aerial is really easiest to see. Right at the back there, you can see a delineation between where the roof drops down, and the intention is just to fill in that little section along
Okay.
the original lines of the house.
Okay. And what's that whitish area just at the rear there? Is that like?
I think that I honestly I think if we go back to the photographs, it might be easy to tell what that is. Yeah, you see it's sort of a freestanding shed that would be removed. It's not.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Andrew, if I can be semi-informal.
Please.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone like to either make a comment or make a motion that the house is considered historically significant and considered for preservation?
I'll make that motion.
All right, that was Malcolm, I believe. Thank you, Malcolm. Is that seconded?
I'll second it. This is Peter.
Okay, thank you. Let me make a little note here. Okay, we will, as for all these Zoom meetings, we take a roll call vote. So Malcolm, your vote on that?
Yes.
Thank you. Mark Syndrome.
Yes.
Thank you. Peter McNamee.
Yes.
Thank you. Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Thank you. Chairs, yes. So it's historically significant and considered for preservation. So now let's take a look at your plans, your demo and rebuild plans, Andrew, and we can proceed to the next phase.
Okay. So what we're looking at here is the front and rear elevation of the existing conditions. On my screen, it's a little bit small, so you'll excuse me if I'm a little bit off, but I believe these are existing conditions. On the right, you can see that, well, on the left, you can see the front of the building, front of the house on Atkinson, and the shape of the gable that continues back through the house. On the rear, you can see in the middle of the elevation is the shed roof coming towards you. And that's the section where we're intending to pull that up and extrude that original gable shape. If you go to the next slide. So here's the side elevation, or the entry, as you pointed out. You can see the entry door in the middle, or the front third section. Most of those windows won't be changed. It's what we're talking about filling in is where in the upper left, where the building steps down and becomes a little shed. Our intention is to take that original gable shape and just fill it to the original back of the house. So there's no change in footprint. Next slide. This is the driveway side of the neighbor to the west. And again, that shows the original shape of the roof and coming down to a shed. And our intention our hope is to add the 90 square feet and fill that in. The house is quite small, and they're hoping to get a tiny bedroom in there.
Mhm.
Next slide. We can you'll excuse me, but this presentation actually is for zoning as well. So some of these,
Okay.
we don't need to go through.
Yep.
This one, you'll see on the left, this is the front elevation of the house does not change.
Mhm.
The back elevation shows the new windows being added on the rear facade to the rear yard. They won't be seen by the street. The intention was to use the same 2/2 design of the original house, but we're adding a little bit more light into a master bedroom and a kitchen downstairs. But this shows that it's shape-wise and proportion-wise, it's the same as the front of the house. Next slide, please. This shows the side elevation, the dotted line. You can see where the proposed fill-in is. And there are some, primarily the original windows of the house remain the same. It's in the back section where the new kitchen and the new master bedroom that we've added a few, but you can see again, the intent is to take the original materials, the original detailing, and 2/2 windows. So that shows the rear
Right.
work.
So did I hear you say that this one window here, you would try to match the existing windows on that side?
Right, you can see the proportions of the new window in the back there. That is the same proportion and size as the original windows.
Mhm.
And when we had to change it because it's above a counter, we're still going with the 2/2 window.
I see below. That's the kitchen, I
Right.
assume below. Yeah. And
Correct.
maybe I wonder if it's just a drawing. It looks like the trim around the new windows is wider than the rest of the house. Is that just
Honestly, these are sort of, not quite finished. The intent
Right.
is to make it look as similar as possible.
Yeah. Okay.
Same. We're not trying to draw attention to it at all. We really want it to look
Right.
like nothing's changed. It's just we're
Yeah.
adding a little more volume and some more windows.
Yep. Thank you.
Next slide, please. Again, this shows from the other side, we've added a new window at a new stair, and that's to match the windows in the front of the building. And where we can, and in the back, you can see where we've intended to fill in.
Okay. And I assume in your demo calculations, you included whatever demolition, wall demolition was required for the new window openings.
I think so. I honestly don't have those numbers in front of me, but I believe so.
Mhm. Yeah, because would be the norm.
So that's about all I have for
Mhm.
presentation.
Yep. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. before I open it to public comment, is there any question or clarification from my fellow panelists, board members?
I believe the owners are here as well, if you have questions for them.
Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any hands or anything like that. So why don't I officially open a public comment period? And I explained the rules earlier. If you would like to make a comment, can be pro, con, or neutral, whatever, please use the Zoom controls to raise your hands so that the Caitlin, who's running the meeting, can recognize you so we can unmute you and allow you to be heard. So we'll pause for a few moments while we see if anyone wishes to be heard. And the only hand I see is yours, Andrew. So looks like we don't have any members of the public wanting to come forward. So we will officially close the public comment period. And I'll make a note of that. And so let me turn to my fellow board members. Do any, what we typically do is just kind of go around the board. I'll just, no particular order. I'll just, in order that you're showing up on my screen. Peter, any questions or comments or thoughts on this?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Is that Malcolm?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
this is a perfectly reasonable project, and we ought to endorse it and say good luck.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Malcolm. Peter, any thoughts from you? And
Malcolm stole my thunder.
okay.
Although I do have a question. I am entirely behind this. It seems pretty straightforward and simple. But the windows on the back side of the house, which is not nope, keep going, go back up to the drawing that we were at a moment ago. 19, I think it is. Oh, that's one. So I have the drawings up on another screen here, and the existing conditions, it just doesn't look like the windows are in the same place. It looks like they move around a bit, which is probably just a drawing error that doesn't really matter, especially given the proximity of that space to, or the visibility of that side of the house. But the two smaller windows down lowest on this elevation are much closer in the existing conditions drawing. Is there something going on with that, or is that just a drawing error?
Peter, the window on the upper left is original and closest to the street. That is staying exactly where it is. It's the same window. Then coming back towards the house, there are two windows. Those are two new windows, and we may be reusing a window, but those are two new around the stairway, and there's a study area in the top. The two small windows, I honestly don't remember. I think that might be existing.
I may be looking at the wrong drawing then, Mr. Sidford. If we can look at the existing condition.
Yeah, it would probably be 9.
So the window in the upper left is not there. It's just the 3.
That's interesting. We might have proposed a new window then. It's been a while. So those two lower windows, I think, are staying, and the rest then are new. So we are adding a new window at the front of the house then.
Right, and in the proposed elevation, those two windows down below are there, but there's a much bigger space between them. So
right, we may have to. I'm sorry, we may be sliding one of those over because we've got a bit of work going with the stair. So we're that existing window, I would suspect.
Okay, so that was more a matter of curiosity because I don't see any issue with any of that anyway. But so that's it, Chair. I think it's a good project.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Mark, how about you? Any thoughts or comments? Oh, we're not hearing you. Are you muted, Mark? Oh, now we can.
Yeah, I'm back here. Just want to make sure that the windows that you had proposed on the other side were actually going to be kept in similar design than it was you had. You alluded to that you would try to, but certainly would be nice if they could stay the way they are on the original building.
Do you mean the proposed new windows or the existing windows?
The proposed windows.
Yeah, the intent is to match those as much as possible. But sometimes when you're ganging the windows together and there's structure between that, it's a little bit, the trim is a little trickier, but the intent is to try and match as much as possible.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark. And how about Joe? Any thoughts, comments?
No, I'm good, thanks. Good job, Peter. You really spotted those windows.
Yeah, so in future, it's let's say it's disturbing when there are apparent faults or errors or something in the plan. Like, I know as chair, I'd like to be voting on something that we know is solid, and that, if we approve a given plan, that is in fact what the city is going to get. So this is a fairly straightforward thing. It's not, the size and nature of the project is such that we can probably accept what you've got going here. I think I understand what that stair going in. I suspect it sounds like there was another architect or someone else involved in actually either the design or the drawing of the plan. So I kind of understand that maybe you don't have definitive answers for everything. So, but
Well,
anyway,
in
just for
fairness,
future.
we prepared the drawings and it's been a while since I've looked at them and I forgot we were
Ah.
adding a window at the front. So we reused those 2 lower windows and the other are 3 new windows to match the original house.
As long as we're on the topic of windows, one last question on those. On the back, if you can see it probably down around slide 15, Caitlin, where we're looking at the rear view. Those, you've got 2 what looks like windows that are in funhouse mirrors. They're stretched almost all the way to the ground. Are those actually, are those just regular windows or patio door windows, or
No,
what's
those are,
going on?
I mean, they're regular, depending on the definition of regular windows. Those are tall double hung windows to bring the light in to the kitchen, because that's where there's no cabinetry and we're really trying to open up some views and light to the backyard.
Huh. Okay, so the sill of that window will be quite close to the floor, it looks
Yep.
like. Yeah,
Yes.
okay. All right. Well, okay. Would anyone care to make a motion? At this point, we need to decide if it is preferably preserved, which means we would need to approve the plans before any demolition and rebuild can happen. Do I hear such a motion?
So move.
That
Mark
sounded like
Sandron.
Mark. Okay, is that second? Anyone want to second Mark's motion that it's preferably preserved?
I'll second that. This is Peter.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Okay, so Mr. Carnwath, your vote on it. It's historically significant, but preferably preserved, and we'll take a vote after this on the actual plans to approve those or not. So Malcolm,
Affirmative.
Oh, thank you. Mark Syndrome.
Yes.
Thank you. Peter McNamee.
Yes.
Thank you. Joe Morgan.
Yes,
And the chair is yes. So technically that imposes a 1-year demolition delay, but we'll not take another vote on a motion to approve the plans and remove the demo delay based on the presented plans potentially as explained and gone over this evening. Is there such a motion on the floor? The motion would be to approve the plans as presented and release the demo delay.
This is Peter. I'll move that we approve the plans and remove the demo delay.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. Is that seconded?
I'll second. Mark Sandron.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Okay, Malcolm, your vote.
Yes.
Thank you, Malcolm. Mark Syndrome.
Yes.
Thank you, Peter McNamee.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
yes,
And the chair is yes. Okay, so Andrew, that means, well, I'm sure you know what it means if you've been here before, that the demo delay was imposed for a matter of minutes, and your owner / applicant can proceed with the various other permits that whatever it is you require. We've probably got an upward extension of a nonconformity or some such thing to worry about, but you can move on to the next step.
Very good. Appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for coming down. Now, next, we're revisiting 4 Plum Street, and I understand from Caitlin that Lisa Mead couldn't make it, but Ben Taylor is here to present. And I see, Ben, I see your hand raised. You can put your hand down if you want. Yeah, I believe you are unmuted. It's been, yes, now you are unmuted, so you should be able to talk.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, but you've got 2 competing devices. Ben, I see you in the thing twice. Okay, maybe as long as one of them is muted, try talking again. Let's see if that's cleared up.
Yeah, I can explain
Okay.
that. So I do have 2 devices going. One is my laptop, one is my phone on the Zoom app. My laptop microphone is terrible. So I'm trying to give it a go with the phone so you guys don't have constant static noise in the background.
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine now. We can
okay.
hear you and there's no echo, so you can go ahead.
Okay.
And as with the, we don't need to, well, you know what the deal is here. We're basically just reviewing the changes that have been made to the plans to see if they can now meet approval of the commission. So why don't you go ahead and tell us what's going on?
Great. So yeah, just for the record, Ben Taylor, 30 Green Street of Mead, Tallerman and Costa. With me tonight is Jeff Alsop, the architect on the project, and also Mike Buchan and Anna Wallach are in attendance. They're the applicant owner of the property. So tonight we're just going to go over some more of the background historical research we did and also the new plans. So Caitlin, could you go to the next slide, please? So firstly, there was the question of what was 23 Elm Street. There was the discrepancy in the district data sheets, particularly with the map and parcel number. It appeared one version of the district data sheets had map 52, parcel 53, which is the same parcel ID as 4 Plum Street. And this actually was new to me. I didn't realize there were 2 sets of district data sheets either. There's the official city set of those, and there's also the Newburyport historicdistrict.org set. Full disclosure, I also have used the historicdistrict.org set quite often, and usually they are the same as what the city has, but I have been informed that moving forward, the planning department wants us to use the city set, and that's the document to be relied upon. So once we discovered that discrepancy, based on the feedback from the commissioners, we went down to the assessor's office, and they confirmed that actually 23 Elm Street is map 52, parcel 54. This actually is the house directly across the street from 4 Plum Street. It does have a central chimney, and it does have the half house architecture. We drove out there today, and it does have more distinctive look of something of a mid 1700s house. So if you could go to the next slide, Caitlin. So yeah, here you see this is the city's set of the district data sheets. It does have the proper map and parcel number, again, circa 1750 shown on that. So if you go to the next slide, please. And again, here's the one from the historicdistrict.org. You can see the discrepancy there with 52-53 in the map and parcel. Otherwise, it is consistent. Just go to the next slide, please. So this is actually, this was in our first presentation back in October, but you can see this is the 1924 assessor map, and you can actually see 23 Elm to the left there. It is a fairly weird layout that you have 21 Elm Street and 4 Plum Street, but then you continue on to 23 Elm. But that actually gives a good visual of where 23 Elm is. Next slide, please. And again, this is just the property record card for 23 Elm. Again, it has the same map 52, parcel 54 at the top right there. And it also does have 1747 as the estimated year built, which is consistent with the district data sheets. Next slide, please. Then on this slide, actually in the top right, I hope you guys can see that photo clearly. That's 23 Elm. That's looking at the corner of Plum and Elm Street. The subject property for this application would be behind you to the left. But again, you can see the central chimney, and you can see the pretty distinctive architecture there. And just next slide, please, Caitlin. You can skip through that one, actually. That's just to complete the property record card. So this is the district data sheet officially from the city's records for Plum Street, map 52, parcel 53, circa 1800 timber frame half house. And then the next slide, you can see that it actually is consistent with the historicdistrict.org records, but just so we're singing from the same sheet of music, this is what we have for the district data sheets. So going to the next slide. We also saw additional information, is the Form A for the Washington Street Residential District. It does include Plum Street in the broader, map of everything in that neighborhood. It doesn't mention Plum Street specifically in its text. I've read through it a few times. It does have a map of the houses and structures. Particularly, it circles the ones that have their own Form B and have been, I guess, singled out, for lack of a better word. The closest one is 2 houses down on Elm Street. So I believe that's 15-17 Elm Street. That does have its own Form B that I've also reviewed. It doesn't really lend any, breadcrumbs, so to speak, about 4 Plum Street. In the Form A, it does mention that, speaking about this area, it provides an excellent illustration of the development of a residential area, which had its beginnings in the early 18th century. Architectural styles dating from the mid to late 19th century are also found in this area. And I think that that's a very accurate and very good description of what we have in the Plum Elm Street neighborhood. If you recall the district data sheet for Elm Street, we saw earlier, it does have a mix of those early to mid 1700s homes, but then also, early 1800s to later 1800s. So I think that's, probably the best way to describe the neighborhood. So next slide. And then also it was discussed at the prior meeting too, if there was any way to uncover what the original structure may have looked like. Looked into this, nothing too definitive, but we're just going to go over what we found quickly. Actually, in the city database, which is available on, I believe, the My Maps, the Northern Essex Planning Commission maps, there actually is a database of past building permits. The oldest one was from 1983, where the owner was going to rehab the living room. Again, that's the direct language that's shown. Unfortunately, not too much else. 1988, the contractor to perform works on the building, including building a deck and moving a door and a window. There was a deck off of the existing one-story bump out that's not there anymore. So I think it was involving that area of the home. And then finally in 2009, to rebuild the chimney 6 feet out of the roof line, which actually is the chimney you presently see. So that chimney is far from original. And I think at our prior meeting, Attorney Mead had represented, the chimney is for ventilation. There currently aren't any fireplaces in the structure. And then obviously probably the biggest, most noticeable change is obviously that one-story bump out, which is the location of where actually the addition is proposed by the applicant. I'll go over them really quickly, but the Sanborn maps we had included don't show that bump out, neither does the 1924 Assessor's Map you've seen. And then probably to state the obvious, there are non-original materials, including asphalt, shingles, the plastic shutters that are being removed, and the modern storm doors. So you just go to the next slide, please. So again, Elm Street is near the 12. I tried to highlight it there. Zooming in, it kind of got blurry, but you can see on the corner of Plum and Elm there, you can just see the square structure. There's no real bump out. Yeah, just slightly above the cursor there. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Oh, sorry, that's the 1888 Sanborn map. So we go to the next slide now. So this is moving on to 1900. Again, same location as the prior map. You can see the square structure on the corner of Elm and Plum Street. Still no bump out. So next slide, please. So actually this moves a little bit. So it's towards the upper left portion of this map. It's 1906. Yep, right where the cursor is there. Again, still a square structure. Go to the next slide. Again, same location. This is 1914. Again, square structure there. Then finally, yeah, right where the cursor is. Thanks, Caitlin. Then the next slide. I apologize. So this is 1914. The prior slide was 1906. But again, same location, same other square structure, no bump out off of it. So then finally, the next slide, we've seen this already, but again, 1924, no bump out off the back. So finally, to get to the plans, updated plans. So the next slide, please. So I'll talk about them briefly. Jeff will be able to go over them a lot more in depth. But first of all, there's no dormer proposed in the new set of plans. I think that was the strongest feedback we got at the prior meeting. So that's gone, not proposed, and not included in the plans that are currently in front of you. The addition's been made smaller. It's in, as I mentioned, it's in the location where the one-story bump out currently exists. It has gotten a little bit smaller in footprint, I'm informed, and the height is much lower. It's gone down below the ridge of the existing structure. Also, that overhang over the doorway is a lot smaller now. Structurally, it's the new addition is going to be supported by a new addition. It's a lot less invasive. It cuts into a lot less of the existing structure and the existing roof. Obviously it's going to place less strain on the existing roof system. The dormer's gone, and also it doesn't cut into the roof, so that's a lot less pressure put on the structure. And also because it is smaller and cutting into less of the structure, it's far more reversible than what was previously proposed. And you will see the design of the addition. It's intended to mirror those existing rear portions of the 21 Elm Street. The rendering captures that pretty well. And then just walking around the neighborhood today again, there are several rear L additions on many of the structures in the neighborhood. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff to go over to the designs. What we've done is there's 3 sets of elevations, one existing, one the prior, and one the current proposal. Then with the renderings, there's a photo of the existing, the prior rendering, and now the current rendering. So we hope that gives you a good comparison. So I'll hand that off to Jeff now.
Yeah, hi, good evening. Jeff Alsop Design out of Hamilton, Mass. I think we have a slightly different configuration of board members tonight, but we have gone through quite a bit of description here. I will try to foreshorten it. If you could scroll down to the 2 renderings. Right. So actually go down one more, please. The previous and one more down. This was our proposal that we came forward with. You don't see the other side, which had the dormer proposals. So this is what people were responding to. I think they were the board members were talking about the scale of the project, what we're proposing compared to others. Yeah, I do want to point out actually in this rendering that you can see the gable ends of buildings that are neighbors. So I didn't think we were trying to push too hard on that, but everyone felt pretty strongly that this was a very old building. Turns out by the research done that it's not as old as I think Joe was interested in finding out about. So that's an answer to that, I think to your concerns, Joe. There was a lot of discussion about how this building would look as you're approaching it from down Plum Street, and so we and that the structure, there's a lot of concern that the old building really couldn't support the level of development that we're proposing and contemplating. So I guess we can go up to the newer rendering. Is it up or down?
The newer rendering was just below it, 25.
There we go. So in the previous proposals, we were actually removing the roof structure and building a new roof structure. A lot of that had to do with requiring structural ridges and essentially building an independent roof system to sit atop the original building structure. So in this case, we are not removing the roof, we're not removing the gables. We are going to preserve what timber frame is left up in the attic space, which is really the only fabric that remains in this building. The addition has been reduced to the footprint with the exception of the little gable entrance facing Elm Street. And the total weight and structure of the of this addition extended vertically is going to be carried within itself. There's a small roof overlay that is going to need some attention on the inside with structure, but it's just an overlay and not really supporting requiring any kind of structural change. You'll notice that the fascia and soffits are aligned. We had a cheek wall in the previous design that actually and a larger width, which made a higher ridge. So in this case, the gable is much reduced. From a design standpoint, I think that the entrance on the side creates a civic kind of welcoming entrance, and it also essentially kind of breaks up the heights of the walls, which are not tall, but just sort of gives a sweeter scale to the approach. I think coming down, you can see relative to the neighbors' gables that were really quite scaled down. Things that remain the same as from the previous proposals is we've differentiated the siding to express that this is something that's in scale and really honoring the building that it's attached to, but is in fact something different, something new. And I don't know that we need to go through the other drawings, but we have a whole slew of drawings if you want to look at them and compare. But I think really the rendering is kind of gives the intent of what we're now proposing.
Yeah, it's pretty dramatic. Well, thank you. Is it you done, Jeff?
Yeah.
Okay. So, fellow board members, what do you think? See, since I ended with you last time, Joe, we'll start with you this time. Any thoughts or comments? Mr. Morgan, did you? Yeah.
Yes.
There you go.
So bear with me. I've had an unstable internet connection this evening, so I don't know. I may cut out at some point. But first of all, I wanted to get a quick thank you in for the additional research that was done by Ben, and the information corresponds to a little bit of further research that I did. Certainly concerning 23 Elm. It's very confusing, but this seems to have cleared it up. Seems like it's an early 1800s building, say 1830s, somewhere in there. That is Plum Street, before Plum Street. So thank you again. This is very helpful. All of that was very helpful.
Welcome. Thanks.
Yes, and Ben, I did lose your explanation when you were talking about structure. You used the term reversibility. Do you mind quickly repeating what you meant by that?
Yeah. So when we discussed earlier in the week with, and Jeff, also do feel free to chime in. We were discussing it early in the week in preparation for the meeting. How oftentimes with what's in front of the board, a consideration is, whether reversibility, whether, if you needed to remove something, you'd be able to do it without damaging the structure. So again, Jeff, do chime in here if you have more insight, but with this being less invasive, if it ever needed to do restoration work or even remove that, that portion of the addition, it'd be far easier than the prior proposal that was in front of you.
I'll chime in a little bit. I think that's, part of historic, national historic criteria for adding structures. I don't believe that this isn't a registered building, so I don't think it actually applies in this case, but it is, I guess it's just indicative of how we decided to really scale this back and retain the half house as in every aspect of the dominant form.
Okay, yeah, and I'll just chime in there on that last thought that I think, and this rendering shows it well. One of my big objections, I personally was very critical of the two ridges being the same, and by lowering that now and reducing the overall massing of the addition, the form of the original house is much more evident, which I think is a big plus. It now clearly reads as that original formed house with a later addition put on the back, and as you correctly pointed out, that's very common all around town, and so it's and very typical. So this new version, I think, certainly answers my big critique about that, and as has already been said, the critique from several members about the dormer. Joe, were you done? I don't know if you cut out there.
No, I wanted to respond to Ben's and Jeff's explanation of the reversibility.
Yeah.
I think it's a very sympathetic response for the reason that I was interested.
I think you did cut out there. I think Joe is having intermittent.
I'm sorry, do you hear me now?
Yeah, now you're back. Yeah, you cut out there for a second.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to say that I think this is a much more sympathetic treatment of the timber frame. That was something that I was very concerned about. And I think this answers my question. You addressed it, and I feel much more comfortable about it. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Peter, how about you? Any thoughts?
The obligatory 2 minutes to find the unmute button.
Okay.
No, I don't have anything to add to what I've heard already. This is a better design. I appreciate the checks and balances that this commission represents, because last week I did say that I was fine with it, but then as I looked a little closer and heard the other comments, I felt the same way about the ridge lines lining up.
Yeah.
And whatnot. So I appreciate the fact that we put a check on that. This looks fine to me. It doesn't look like some great beast has come along and in the process of swallowing the original structure.
Yeah, that's my feelings are very similar. And also given the small size of the lot and the small size of the surrounding neighborhood buildings, it just is a much better fit overall, in my opinion anyway. Mark, how about you?
Thank you. I was not at the initial presentation, so I'm sorry about that. But I do agree with Chairman's comments regarding the overall volume of the addition with regards to the entire structure. I may have missed it because I was not present, but I'm curious about the two doors. What is the necessity of the second door onto the addition and the need for that extra roof addition?
Jeff Alsop here. The door, original door on Elm Street is essentially non-functioning. We've propose that that door have essentially like a board, a solid wooden plank panel over it, so that it'll look like a traditional storm panel. That really doesn't function in the house. The current entry is in the bump out addition. So we're keeping that door and the stoop as just as a historical reference.
Okay, so so that you're talking about the door that we see in this rendering, right?
To the left, the one that's
Right, the one that's at the street. That's I believe that's Plum Street, right?
correct. So that's basically
Okay. And I don't remember, is there any door on Elm Street? I don't think so. Is there?
in that gable at that location.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the no, on the side that we can't see in this rendering on Elm Street.
Oh, no, there's not. No.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's kind of a hit. Probably my guess would be due to evolution of the changes in interior use of the various rooms, that what was once the functioning entry door is now kind of vestigial, if you will, but it's being kept for kind of historical purposes. So it's, if I understood you correctly, you're gonna basically put like a board and batten storm door type of thing there to make it, to kind of treat it.
Correct. Just to keep the rhythm, the historical rhythm of the fenestration and
Right.
make reference. I'm certain that there wasn't a door where the addition is. Some of the,
Right.
as you saw in the first presentation tonight, the doors are fairly often on the long wall gable
Right.
or the street wall. So I'm not really sure of the evolution of that. The interior really doesn't have any, there's no center chimney. There's no vestigial layout that you would recognize.
Yeah, I have a feeling, I haven't inspected that place, but I have a gut feeling that it's seen quite a bit of renovation over the many years it's been around. Okay, who did I miss? Malcolm, any thoughts? Oh, I'm sorry, Mark. Were you any other thing, Mark?
No.
Did we answer your question? Okay. Malcolm, any thoughts or comments for
Yeah, I think this is a much better design, and I'm good with it.
Okay. All right. Would anyone care to make a motion? The motion would be that the board finds this most recent set of plans acceptable and is willing to lift the demolition delay. Does someone wish to make such a motion? And if you are in agreement that the plans are okay, that would be a yes vote. If you're not happy with them, that would be a no vote. So is there such a motion?
Yes, this is Joe. I move that the plans are acceptable as presented tonight.
Okay.
Excuse me, for Plum. And that
Okay.
the commission vote to remove the demo delay.
Okay. Is that seconded?
This is Peter. I'll second that.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. Okay, Mr. Carnwath, your vote on that.
Yes.
Thank you. Make it the right key here. Mark Syndrome.
Yes.
Thank you. Peter.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Thank you. And the chair is also votes yes. And with the comment that when I saw the rendering when that was posted several days ago, I was very pleased that you had taken quite significant steps in scaling this down. I realized that the owner is probably sacrificing a good bit of room they were hoping to get on that third floor, but I do think that the neighbors or the neighborhood will much better, its historic character will be much better preserved with this plan. So thank you for going through this. Appreciate it.
Thank you all very much.
Okay,
Good night.
thanks for coming out tonight.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the few other items on the agenda there are 3 items for the Community Preservation Act, people looking for money essentially. By the way, Joe, your hand is up. Is that just by accident? find the button. Okay, well, he's looking for the button. The first one we mentioned at the last meeting, but we didn't get into it, so you would all have a chance to look it over. Basically, what's posted is an email from Jordy Vining. He is a project manager with the City Planning Board, and it's not clear to me if this is an official city project, but it's something that he is involved with on behalf of the city and is working with others in the city to pull together historic information about the history of African-American citizens of Newburyport, what their businesses were, where they lived, what people of note may have been there. And I was very interested. I don't know if you guys had a chance. Well, actually, you probably hadn't. Glee Woodworth is a local historian, and she has been producing some local history stuff. And she had a piece on a woman by the name of Melnia Jones Cass. She was originally from Virginia, it's a complicated story. She was purchased out of slavery back in, I think it was 1845 or thereabouts. And she came up to Newburyport, was working with a prominent family here. And she was paying back the money that was used to purchase her freedom. But the person who did that, whose name I'm blanking on, I think it was I can't remember at the time, but anyway, basically forgave the rest of that quote unquote loan. It's a very poignant story. And it includes some of the interesting letters back to her family that was still enslaved at the time. Or yeah, it's always poignant for me to read some of those. But anyway, so believe it or not, there is some interesting history of African Americans in the town and businesses they held. I'm told by, if you read the whole thing, you may have seen that there was an area downtown, you might not have heard of Elbow Lane. My son, who works for the Postal Service, is familiar with it. He's getting to know the city very intimately. It's a little teeny weeny street that is by Soufflés, you know, that kind of kitchen coffee shop down between the Market Square and that laundromat there. There's a little, almost really is an alley, and apparently there was a group of African-American owned businesses down in that community corner or whatever. Anyway, some interesting stuff. So the idea here is to finalize and put up some of those interpretive signs that you see typically in the rail trail. I'm sure you've all seen those. They're the angled signs. They're maybe, I don't know, about 3 or 4 feet wide and so on. And I personally find them nicely done and informative. So he's looking for support and funding to do that. Now, I was discussing some of these projects. We don't have the final proposal yet, but he was looking for the Historical Commission to lend its support, at least to the idea of this. So typically, the way we do that is the commission will, there'll be a motion that the commission, supports it, and we'll vote that up or down. If that passes, I will draft basically it's usually just an email to the the Community Preservation Committee or their chair, and just saying that the commission has reviewed the proposal such as it is at the time. As again, I said, it's not quite finalized yet, and that we're in support of it. So having said all that, have you folks had a chance to look it over, and anyone have any comment or thoughts for it or against it?
Seems like a laudable project.
Yep. Thank you, Mark. That was Mark. Any other? Yeah, I have the advantage over you all in that I did spend about 45 minutes or so on the phone with Jordy to discuss this. And so I know, he's very enthusiastic about it, as Jordy can be, but again, he's still trying to work out the final details. So he does not yet have exactly how many. I think his proposal is a little ambitious. In his email, you'll see there's over half a dozen bullet points that could each represent a sign. I don't think there's going to be quite that many. I'm imagining there might end up being 3, maybe 4. And they've got to be both, they've got to be selected. The content's got to be figured out and coordinated with other interpretive signs throughout the city, because we don't want these things popping up like weeds, but we do. So the city, and and Newburyport and I talked about this, and Caitlin, about kind of coordinating the proliferation of these signs that we have, that there's a balance between wanting to provide informative interpretive signage and going too far. Anyway, do you guys feel comfortable taking a vote on sending a note to the commission there, or the committee, I guess it is, that we feel that it's a cause worthy of support and consistent with at least as historical? It's kind of, Caitlin, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the criteria for applying for community preservation funds is around history, preserving the history of a community. So I think that all of these are going to rely heavily on that history aspect of things. So an email or a letter from the commission saying that, yeah, we think this is a good idea, is very helpful to that. So what do you guys feel? Would anyone care to move that the board, I guess the motion I would expect would be that the Historical Commission approves the chair to draft a letter to the Community Preservation Committee saying that we support the project.
I propose that. I propose that we move to approve the concept, and that looks like I'm.
Yeah, we hear you, Joe.
Okay, you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
I was like I'd cut out again, but and that the chair writes a memo to that effect, that we approve the concept for the CPC grant.
Very good.
I second the motion.
Okay, I think that was Mark, right?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I like to keep track of these things. Okay, so 1 second here, we'll do our roll call vote. So Mr. Malcolm, your vote on this?
Yes.
Thank you, Malcolm. Mark Centron?
Yes.
Thank you. Peter McNamee?
Yes.
Thanks. Joe Morgan?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I'm in favor as well. I look forward to getting better definition around it. And quite frankly, there are some things I've been learning myself. I've been in this town over 40 years, but I'm finding that I don't know everything about it. And I'm learning a lot about an aspect of Newburyport's history about which I suspect many people know very little. I'll just give you one quick example before we move on to the next one. There is a former railroad bridge for when the train station was down, but almost to Merrimack Street, along Winter Street. There was a railroad bridge over Low Street, which is now a rail trail bridge, and it was referred to as the Guinea Bridge. And I never knew why. Apparently, that section of town was referred to as, I don't know, either Guinea Town or something like that, because, not a very flattering term, I think we'll all admit, but it was because there was a community of Black Americans, that dwelled there. So be very interested to find out more about some of these interesting aspects of our city's past. All right,
I thought that was the Italian area.
Well, I talked to Jordy about that, Malcolm, and I asked him basically the same question, because where I grew up in Yonkers, New York, and the New York City area, Guinea was applied disparagingly to Italian Americans, of which I'm semi-one. I'm slightly more than half Italian. But anyway, he said, well, it was originally referred to as the Blacks, and if you picture Africa, the west coast of Africa, in that indentation there where it's present-day Nigeria and Ghana and Ivory Coast and all that is today, that was called the Guinea Coast. And if you look on old maps, you'll see that that was just, well, it was just called the Guinea Coast, that whole region. And so it was referred to originally to African Americans or enslaved people or whomever, basically very dark-skinned former residents of that region coming in. And it was applied later to Italians because they were also considered to have what my wife refers to as swarthy complexions. I guess compared to her, she's kind of Irish and English. I guess compared to her, I'm quote swarthy. I don't think of myself as particularly swarthy. But anyway, Malcolm, apparently that's the deal with that whole expression, Guinea. Anyway.
That's interesting.
Yes. Yeah, I'm finding out a lot. All right, let's move on here. So we're not here all night. To the Cushing House, or the Museum of Old Newbury. Let's see, is Susan here to talk to us about this tonight? I see
Yes.
Museum of Old Newbury is there. Your hand is up, and we have you unmuted. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about your proposal?
Thank you. Yes, actually, Bethany Groff-Durow and I are both here.
Okay.
So perhaps you would unmute her as well. We're doing a bit of a tag team. We're working on this project together.
Go right
I'm
ahead.
right here. So we put together for you a PowerPoint that basically summarizes our proposal that will be submitted next week to the CPC for funding. And we're very grateful for all of the support that the CPC has given us in past years to do both interior work, restoration and preservation on the Cushing House itself, on the Perkins printing and engraving plant, and on the landscape. And we have prioritized our projects and realized that one of the things that is desperately in need of preservation are the architectural elements on the exterior of the Cushing House. And that's primarily all of the cornice moldings and decorative trim, as well as the shutters on the house. Next slide, please. We have decided that because of the specialty of this work and the significant costs, that as we did with the landscape project, we will phase it into 3 phases. And so this would include the crown moldings, the rope band moldings, the bead moldings, and the dental moldings. And we'll show you illustrations of those in just a moment. The gutters, the freezeboard trim blocks, the soffit and fascia trim, and lastly, but not least, the shutters. Next slide, please. We have done considerable work with our contractor, and have decided that we will not do in phase 1 the first 2 facades of the Cushing House, but that we'll take a step back and do a more comprehensive and thoughtful treatment of the project. So phase 1 will actually include the restoration and reconstruction of the shutters for all 4 elevations of the house. The second part of phase 1 will be assessing further and examining the trim on all of the architectural elements and determining what can be salvaged and what cannot be salvaged, and then having the custom millwork done to reproduce exactly the original trim that is up there. Phase 2 of the project would be to work on the back and the garden sides of the house to install and restore the elements. And then phase 3 would be to work on the High Street facade and the Fruit Street elevation of the Cushing House. Next slide, please. So what I've done here, and I realize that this is a little bit small, but this is the garden side elevation. We have a number of fragments that have come from this side of the house, and I don't know whether you can see my pointer or not, but you'll see that there are a number of the frieze blocks and soffits that have fallen out on the trim on this side of the house.
Yeah, it looks like there's a couple by that leftmost chimney
Exactly.
Yeah, that are just
There,
missing.
there are 3 or 4 there. So next slide, please. These are the salvaged fragments over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. There's some of the bead molding, the freeze blocks, the soffits, the rope bands, and it's a safety hazard to those who are visiting the museum and gardens. Fortunately, we haven't had any incidents, but it's a concern to us, both that and the shutters. But more importantly, it's the preservation of this National Historic Landmark. And we feel that it is significant enough and they are unique and extraordinary, and that this is a priority for the museum. Next slide, please. These following slides show you some of the details of the rotted elements. On the corner here, what you're seeing primarily is the deteriorated wooden gutter. And then down below that, one of the freeze blocks is missing, and the rope, actually the bead molding in that case, is missing in part.
Pardon the interruption, Susan. So I was wondering about those holes, but I hesitated to ask. All those holes, and then you see them both in those kind of large rectangular blocks or square blocks, and in the molding below that, kind of a, I forget the architectural term for that. So are those strictly decorative, or were those functional, or do you happen to know?
Functional as well as decorative.
So, okay, so to provide ventilation or
Right, exactly.
venting is, I see.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So
Go ahead.
But they made them probably more attractive during the federal period than we would today. So next slide, please. So here you can see the ones that are still in place, but you can see how badly deteriorated they are. And we feel that the sooner that we can get to work on this and get the millwork done and prepared, that will facilitate the implementation in the following year. Next slide. Now this is the wooden gutter on the east elevation, which is the Fruit Street elevation of the house. And again, you can see that the bead molding is badly deteriorated there. And we have lost fairly large segments of that on all 4 elevations of the house. Next slide. And then to come to the shutters. These are representative of the deterioration of the wooden shutters throughout. The one on the upper left is the fan light over the front door on High Street. The one on the bottom is a lower shutter on the garden side, and the one on the right is from the east Fruit Street elevation on the first floor. We have done patchwork, but no serious restoration and rebuilding of the shutters over the last few years. And we believe that there are enough of them in good shape that we can restore them at this point rather than replacing them. And so that is our plan of action. I believe that's the last slide. So I'd like to thank you all for allowing us to present tonight and answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Susan. And I'll just comment to the rest. I've been on the board long enough. I know Malcolm probably has as well. Some of you may have been around to remember some of your previous projects. I especially remember the electrical work, and my understanding that it's now been complete. You know, this building normally is interesting. Normally we are concerned with the exterior of buildings, and so this particular application you're bringing to us tonight is very relevant in that. It's also, you know, you have an interesting situation in that usually we don't get involved with the interiors, but where you're a museum, it's a whole different situation where the interior is also kind of sort of a public space. And plus you've got the interior parts of the house, plus you've got your collection. So it's a very, you know, it's a whole amalgam of, a combination of things, all of which even by themselves are important, but together it's like a synergistic thing. Anyway, I don't want to ramble on too long, but I know I personally think you guys have been doing some very good work trying to preserve what you've got, both in terms of your collection and the house or the building structure that it's enclosed within. It certainly shows the elaborate. I didn't even realize myself quite how elaborate some of that woodwork was until you've shown us these photographs. So let me turn to my fellow board members here. Any questions for the presenters? Thoughts, comments? Anyone? Don't to be bashful.
This is Bethany. Could I
Yep.
just make one quick clarification? Thank you, Susan.
Sure.
That was wonderful. As you can see in the slide, there are several shutters that are not going to be salvageable. The plan is that year one, the shutters will be removed and assessed, and then some will be replaced, but we're going to try to stabilize and reuse as many shutters as possible. Some will clearly need to be remade.
Okay, thank you, Bethany.
Thanks, Bethany.
Okay, if would anyone care to make a motion similar to the one that Joe Morgan made a few moments ago? If you all feel that this is a application that the Historical Commission would be in favor of, involving the preservation of this probably one of the most preeminent historic structures in the city. Is there such a motion?
Yeah, so moved.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. So I'll consider the motion to be that the commission authorizes the chair to write similar to what Joe said. The commission authorizes the chair to write an email expressing our support of the application. Is there a second for that?
Mark Sendo, and I'll second.
Okay, thank you. So that was just making
And I
Malcolm
hope that
and
doesn't pose a conflict of interest because I'm involved at the Historical Society.
Okay. Malcolm, your vote?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mark Syndrome?
Yes.
Your vote? Okay, thank you. Peter McNamee?
Yes.
Thanks. Joe Morgan? Your vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Chair is also in support, so more writing for me, I'm afraid. All right, well, thank you, Bethany and Susan.
Thank you
Appreciate you
very
coming
much.
in and appreciate all the photographs. It really made quite evident the problem, and we wish you luck with your application, and we will draft up a note expressing the commission's support.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
all.
support.
Okay, you're welcome. Third, we have Jack Santos I believe is here. Let's see. Yes, he is, and he's been unmuted. So Jack, you're going to talk to us about your application to, I believe it's to repaint or in some way restore the clock on the Old South Church. And just for reference, Joe, this is probably one I'm sure you will remember. This is the church that you had done some work helping them with getting their preservation restriction done because they had some community preservation funds to do some restoration work for the tower there. So Jack, you want to tell us what your application is all about?
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you just fine.
Awesome. So yeah, as Chairman Richards has said, I'm Jack Santos. I'm honored to be here. Thank you very much for hearing me out and allowing me to speak about this. We're going to talk about Old South and specifically the Old South clock face. I'm sure everybody in town is familiar with the Old South clock face because it is a community treasure. And what I'm proposing, if next slide, please, is that we give that clock face, not the church, not the steps, nothing else associated with the church, but just the face of the clock, the hands, the minute markers, and the black background, a new coat of paint. That clock was originally installed in 1785. The current clock was actually installed in 1896, replacing the 1785 clock. And it's been up there since 1896. It's a tribute to Albert Plummer, who was given to the church by his sisters, and Albert was a parishioner at the Old South Church. And as you all know, the Old South Presbyterian Church is already subject to a preservation restriction because of its iconic. It's an iconic part of Newburyport. Next slide. So that's the what. The why, or more specifically, the why me. I'm here not because I have anything to do with Old South. I'm not a parishioner. I'm not a member of the church. I am a neighbor. So there's nothing more relevant in terms of community preservation than a neighbor coming to you to make this proposal and explain why that clock needs a coat of paint. So you may ask, why are you here then? As a neighbor, about 5 years ago, I approached the pastor at Old South and said, what's going on? That clock hasn't worked for 3 years. And he threw up his hands and said, we gave up. And there's nobody who knows how to fix these old clocks anymore. It's too expensive. We don't have money. I asked him, can I take a look at it? We fixed it. It's been running ever since. So I am the unofficial clock caretaker now at Old South. That's me working on the 1896 E. Howard clock up in the steeple. So I take care of the clock. A long line of clock caretakers. I took over from Steve Cunningham, who unfortunately passed away 3 years before I took over, which was why nobody else knew what to do with that clock and how to take care of it. And it is an honor and a privilege to be able to do that along with the other clock caretakers in town, taking care of all the other clocks. It really is a community resource, and occasionally I have to go out and hold out my hat to collect money to fix things, and this is why I'm here today. So the next slide, please. That's the clock. That's a drone shot, a close-up, and that's why it's time to paint it. You can see the damage that's happening, particularly to the numbers Roman numeral 7 and Roman numerals 8 on one face, and Roman numeral 2, 4, and 7 on the other face. It just, in general, the paint has faded. It's not very good looking anymore. It needs a new fresh coat of gold paint, maybe not gold leaf, maybe just gold. We'll determine that as we go along. And what I'm worried about right now is as it's deteriorating, we're already starting to see some rot and deterioration on the wood. And I'm afraid that those small minute markers are going to start to fall off if we don't do something sometime soon. Every storm, and I'll be there Saturday and Sunday during the upcoming blizzard, I'm kind of holding my breath to make sure that a number or a minute marker doesn't fall off. And I also know that it's deteriorating because those of you that are avid timekeepers will note that the clock is plus or minus 10 minutes accurate. It's sometimes it's 5 minutes fast, sometimes it's 5 minutes slow, mainly because the hands are unbalanced. And while we're up there painting, we're going to rebalance those hands and try to get it a little bit more accurate here in the 21st century. So next slide. Here's just kind of how we map against the criteria for the Community Preservation Committee that will be reviewing this. For those of you that aren't familiar with the criteria for the Community Preservation Act, there's 4 areas: open space, historic preservation, affordable housing, and recreation. The red dots on this reflect the fact that we really only hit the mark on a historic preservation. This is not an open space, affordable housing, or recreation proposal. So that's we're very focused on the historic preservation aspect of it. And it's not a city-owned asset, which is also a big plus. We're making a CPC proposal. But I will say to all of you that we may not check the box on recreation, but you're more than welcome to come with me at any time and go up to 5 or 6 stories into the steeple and get your share of exercise. So that is an open invitation to come in and visit the clock. It's quite a sight when we go into the steeple. Next slide, please. The support of the community has been overwhelming. I took advantage of social media, put out a couple of notes about what we're trying to do, and that we're going to go in front of both the Historic Commission and the Community Preservation Commission, and immediately got just flooded with letters. It was just so heartwarming. People in the community just said, oh, really, we got to take care of this. This is really important to us. And we love that church. We love that clock. So it's I'm really pleased about that, and those are included in the packet that I'm submitting to the CPC, as well as the Preservation Trust is behind this project and wholeheartedly. So they've also made a recommendation to support this effort. Next slide. It's basically going to cost us about $5,150. I've got an estimate, lined up contractors. A big significant part of that cost is to get the lift up there for the amount of time it's going to take, possibly 3-4 days to paint the clock, and because of 3 sides and the work that might need to be done in terms of any repair that has to take place in the hand balancing. So American Renaissance, local firm, they very experienced in this. In fact, they did the Salisbury church clock up next to the CVS in the center of Salisbury. So you can see their work. And I went and inspected that, and it looks really good. So I'm looking forward to having a company, either American Renaissance or a company of their caliber, do it. But I suspect it'll be American Renaissance if everything holds true. The other thing I want to point out here is I am confident that not only the folks that submitted the letters, but other organizations will raise 10% of the cost, $500. So we've got some skin in this game, not only from community preservation, but as the community itself and the neighbors of the clock. So that's how much it's cherished. I'll manage the project along with the Reverend Scott DeBlock at the Old South Church and Elder Jeannie Cunningham. So I did have the church's approval. I had to go through their elders committee to I'm an outsider, so there's what are you doing, Jack? And so I got their okay, and they are fully supportive as well. So I'm hoping we get this done, and love the clock, and I hope it gets painted. Any questions?
No, I don't think I have any. Let me ask my fellow commissioners if anyone else has one. While you were talking, a couple came up, but you've pretty much answered them. Very thorough presentation. I was going to, to be honest, I didn't realize it was going to be quite that expensive. I guess a lot of that, well, part of that is the balancing. I didn't realize that was part of it, and of course the location of the face. Well, plus I forgot that there was not just one face. There's 3 faces to be done.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So there's 3, and it's not like you can just put up a ladder. It's a little more complicated. So it all adds to the cost. So it's unfortunate that it has to be that expensive. So any questions, comments, motions, thoughts?
Just wondering, is the contingency large enough in case?
Yeah, no, I'm pretty confident that's a good contingency, 20%. But
Has someone inspected the actual condition of the wood? You said that there were some problems where you were worried that pieces might fall off. What's the condition of the substrate? In other words, is painting sufficient does it need to be restored in a more aggressive way?
Well, I put another $500 in there for part of that carpentry and potential repairs. You know, I haven't taken out my ropes and, to go over the side and check it out myself. So you know, we won't know until we go up there.
Jack, some churches, like I know at Belleville, I've been up in their clock tower, there's like a little hatch or a little sort of window you can open up and that's right in the clock face. I take it Old South doesn't have that opening where you can actually get a pretty up close look at the condition of the clock face.
Yeah, it does. As
Oh, it does?
You're pretty sharp. That's good. No, it does. That's actually nailed shut. You know, it's not that simple to take that out, but we could. That my concern is, you know, it's along the outside. I suspect that is where we're going to see a lot of damage, if there is any damage. You know, the rim against the clapboard of the church.
Yeah, and I do see that. I was looking while you were talking. I was looking at American Renaissance, is looking at their proposal, and I do see that they do plan to, you know, unless something is really beyond, you know, repair, that they do. If there are cracks or holes, they will use a bonding epoxy resin to fix those, along with the caulking and anything else.
The Congregational Church, their church, actually, when they redid their steeple, redid their clock, and they went one step further and replaced all letters with aluminum. Churches are doing that. I kind of considered whether we should do that or not, but I'd like to kind of keep it traditional, keep it the way it was.
I see. Okay.
Chair, just I would have one question, just going back to what Commissioner Morgan asked. The contingency of 20%, that could pretty easily get eaten up, Jack. Do you have a contingency plan on top of that? What happens if you do, you know, what happens if the worst happens and you've got double that for costs? How are those costs going to get covered?
Yeah, I got to tell you, I'm just based on the feedback I got from the community. I think people will open up their pocketbooks pretty quickly, you know, should that happen. We ran here on Spring. I live on Spring Street in the South End, and just this past summer we ran a program to plant more trees. We planted 9 trees on the street, and you know, the neighbors were all just absolutely thrilled to donate, you know, $500 a piece to get the trees done. So I'm thinking we'll get that kind of reaction with Old South if we have to.
I'm sure that you would. The question that comes to mind for me though is the expensive part of this, aside from the contractor's time, is the lift, and there's a very defined window on having that lift there. So if they get up there on day one and find that you've got considerably more than $850 worth of extras, do you think you'd be able to move that quickly? And I'm entirely behind it. I'm just posing that question, especially with something as old and as inaccessible as it is.
Good question. Well, one option and one potential contingency plan, and I'm kind of riffing here a little bit, but you'll notice those two the pictures. If Caitlin, if you can go back to the pictures of the clocks, the clock faces, those are the sides that face the sun. They have gotten the most damage, amazingly enough. So the north side is, you know, it could probably go another year or two. So in you know, worst case, I suppose, if we're finding a lot of damage, I would take care of those two first, and then come back and figure out what to do with the north side at a later date.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I know that I was surprised by a similar phenomenon. I have on my house, Jack, that the side that faces the sun, it's I don't know if it must be the ultraviolet from the sun, but that it's pretty damaging. You know, you might get mildew or something on the north side, or moss, whatever, but the south side takes a beating. Anyway,
Wear that suntan lotion. There you go.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts, comments, or motions?
It's Joe. I was just wondering, could we move that the project is fine, like we did for the signage, the Afro-American signage,
Mhm.
could we say that, yes, it's a legitimate historically enhancing project for the city of Newburyport, and but leave it to the CPC to sort of figure out the budgetary details and the management of it?
Mhm.
I mean, is that
Well, typically, yeah, typically, Joe, that's what's always going to happen anyway, in the sense that like we don't have any say or control over, how much they, excuse me, sorry, how much they will allow. What typically happens is, they will review this along with the other applications, depending. So, and they've got this, sack of money that they've got for this year. They have all these applications, and they've got to decide which of the applications that are most worthy. Do they have enough money to give them their full amount? Do they have to, reduce it somewhat and all that? So that almost no matter what we say or how strongly we're for something or even against it, they're gonna even if everyone is for it, they're still going to have to look at it with with an eye to the whole financial situation, and so on.
So our role is just to endorse it as a worthy project, eligible, potentially eligible for CPC funds.
Yeah, but the way I would describe our role, Joe, is as part of our mission of preserving the historical values of the city and the historical neighborhoods and so on. When a project comes up that has an effect on those, do we think that it's has a positive impact, negative impact, neutral? Usually, typically it'll have a positive impact, because it's a restoration or whatever, as these are. So so that's what we're saying, is that given our mission in terms of helping to preserve our historical heritage and architectural heritage and so on, we think that the concept has merit, is basically what we're saying. And then the details as to exactly how they go about it and how they fund it is kind of, I hate to say not our problem, but it's not our problem. I think you might have frozen up again, Joe, but I hope that answered your question. And I know I had similar questions on my mind as well. So anybody else want to speak or make a motion so we can wrap up this aspect of our meeting? Joe, I see you're back. Did that answer your question?
Yes, that's good. That's fine. That's what I suspected.
Okay.
So I would move to approve the concept for CPC review, that it's approved by the Historical Commission, and that you inform the CPC that we do endorse the project, the proposal.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Is there a second?
I'll second. Mark Sendron.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So Malcolm, your vote on that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Yes.
Thank you. Patrick? I'm sorry. Yeah, Peter, sorry.
Yes.
Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Boy, my throat's really, and the chair is also yes. So Jack, so we'll send a note to the CPC and we'll copy you on that. So you can include that as part of your submittal along with your other letters of support and so on. And, I think both Joe and Peter and others have raised very valid points as far as you don't quite know until you get into it what you're going to find there. But, I would encourage you to get as much, and I assume American Renaissance has tried at least somewhat to scope it out to see, what kind of condition they've got there, but hopefully it won't, it'll be nothing too terribly bad.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, thank you very much, Chairman Richards. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, gentlemen. Hey, can I add one more thing?
Well,
if I
it'll
could.
cost you.
Well,
I'm just kidding, Jack. What is it?
No, just going back to the Black History Initiative, because I've spoken to Glee Woodworth about it, and now that I've gotten past this hurdle, I can actually try to correct the chairman. You kind of alluded to the people. Celia Owens was the black slave that was paid for, was partially freed by a white citizen in town that paid the reason. But the other person, you buried the lead, Melnia Cass. Melnia Cass is the Melnia Cass of Melnia Cass Boulevard in Boston, which is always making headlines over the drug addiction problems they have down there. So Boston loves her, and it's just a thrill that she's lived up here in Newburyport and went to the Kelly School.
Thank you for correcting me. You're absolutely right. Now that you've mentioned that, I was conflating those two names, and you're correct. So I stand corrected. And yeah, thank you, Jack.
Okay, thanks. Have a great evening.
Thank you. So I wrote a historical report, advisory report for 79 State Street. This was that Greek revival, former residents, now kind of law offices and so on. I hope you've had a chance to review that. Thank you, Joe, for proofreading it and having a couple of corrections. So I'm going to assume that you have, and would someone care to make a motion that, well, first of all, let me back up. Before we take the actual vote on approving that, did anyone see anything in there? What I would be concerned about is if I either left out something that one of you felt was important to include, or if I misstated anything, or that either of those corrections that might need to be made before we send it off. I see Peter shaking his head.
Nope.
I think Mark was shaking his head. I think Joe's shaking his head. I can't see Malcolm. He has no video, but maybe he's shaking his head too. Okay, in that case, I would love to entertain a motion that the board says it's okay to remove the draft wording from that and forward it on to the planning board as the official report. Is there such a motion?
So move, Mark Sedron.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
I'll second that, Peter.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Okay, Malcolm, your vote on that?
Yes.
Thank you. Mark?
Yes.
Thank you. Peter?
Yes.
And Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Thank you. The chair obviously is yes. Thank you.
Oh,
That.
shoot.
We heard that, whoever that was. Okay. We'll strike that last comment from the record. Okay. We've got approval of the minutes from January 13th. That was the big meeting that had like 3 or 4 demo delay hearings and so on. I know I reviewed them. The minutes were good. I thought, were there anyone spot anything wrong with the minutes, or is there a motion to approve those?
I move to approve the minutes.
Okay, thanks. That was Joe Morgan, correct?
Yes, Joe.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second. It's Peter.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Okay, Malcolm, do you approve the minutes?
Yes.
Mark, I think, were you here last week, Mark, our last meeting? I think that was the one you missed, right?
That is correct. Yeah, I'll recuse
Okay.
myself.
Okay, so we'll recuse you from that one. Peter?
Yes.
Okay, and Joe? Oh, it froze again. And the channel of the chair is yes. So we've got 3 so far. Unfreeze yourself, Joe, so you can hopefully take a vote on this. I don't know why you're, wonder if you can hear me, Joe, try maybe turning off your video. Maybe that will help. We can, at least get your audio going more reliably so we can get your vote on this. While we're waiting for, oh, there he goes. Joe, you back?
Yeah, sorry about that. That's a yes.
Okay, good. So that passes. We do need 4 affirmative votes to pass anything. The chair doesn't have any updates. I want to try to wrap this up. We do have the annual election of officers. What I was thinking, I know people have been hesitant to step forward. I would just remind folks once again that the vice chair position doesn't entail any real extra work. The only thing that is at all quote unquote extra is that in my communications with the planning board, you'll be copying on those. So my idea is to have someone who's fully informed as to what's going on, both in public view and out of it, so that if I can't run a meeting, there's someone else who can run the meeting effectively. And what was the other thing? Oh, that we have Caitlin and I, and often, and usually Andy will have a brief meeting the day before, on the Wednesday before a meeting. We'll just go over the agendas, make sure, see if there's any questions, any concerns, anything we need to, know about or whatever. Like we had one yesterday, it was maybe, I don't know, 20, 25 minutes, that kind of thing. So that's the only other really duty, if you want to call it that, and even that's kind of optional, but so it's really not a big deal. And if still no one is willing to throw their hat into that ring, what I was going to propose is someone would like to try it for like a trial period of let's say 3 months, and then with the understanding that if they felt it was didn't want to continue, they could be allowed to step down. That would be okay with me, because I'm pretty confident that you'd find that it's really fine. So having said all that, is there anyone who would consider being a vice chair? Now, don't all spring forward at once. I might not be able to handle it. I see you smiling, Peter. So no takers so far?
Hey, Chair Richards, I have a question.
Yes.
The main issue is someone, I think, to stand in for you when you're not here. Could we all agree in principle that one of us would do that in the here for a particular meeting, and we'd be winging it because we haven't really, none of us have practiced for that particular role
Right.
to lead the meeting, but I think we could probably get through it if people are willing to to bear with that individual.
Yeah, and that actually de facto, that's kind of what happens, Joe. I'm trying to remember where there was a period of time shortly before I became chair that the then current chair was having both very heavy work schedule combined with some personal issues of their own that was requiring, they actually missed, it wasn't unusual for them to be absent for a meeting. So, sometimes, one of the more experienced members of the group, who, and actually we were meeting in person then, so that made it a little bit easier because we could kind of, was a bit easier to kind of kibitz, for lack of a better term, to make sure we're doing everything straight. I even had some very helpful hints from the note taker and Caitlin and so on, just to make sure the procedure was being done properly and so on. I'm confident that any of you folks, especially, I could share with you my kind of notes and outline, but that I use. So yeah, I'm confident that any of you guys could run the meeting. So I'll look into whether there's, the ordinance calls for, originally it called for a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary.
And then
we eliminated the secretary because there's an official note taker. I'm not sure if there's an issue with the ordinance or not, but I'll find out.
Yeah, so the question is, do we have a formal vice chair, or can, are the fellow commissioners, are they willing to step in when needed?
Yeah.
On a rotating basis, say, or whatever. I mean, we're talking about unusual situations where you're on vacation or for some reason you're sick or just can't make a meeting. If we're in agreement that we can step in on short notice, then we're covered. Okay.
Well, what's the sense of the commission? Do other commissioners feel that Mr. Morgan's proposal makes sense, and there's a general sense of collaboration and cooperation that you guys would be able to carry on in the absence of yours truly? Either say something or nod or something.
I think that's workable. I think it essentially lands us in the same position, whoever would likely take the permanent position probably end up filling that role.
Mhm.
And I think Joel's intermittent internet service tonight is just him sort of seeding the ground so that we don't trust that he'll be able to do it.
Yeah, he might
So
have,
naturally
Right.
he makes the suggestion.
yeah, he
That's
might have
right.
rigged that.
I'm just hitting this switch every once in a while.
Very clever, Joe. All right, well, we'll leave it there for now because I know you guys want to get on with your lives. Let's see, we did approval of the minutes. I think the only official vote we need to take right now is to adjourn, unless someone else has anything else they want to add or say before we do that. By the way, can you like hear a lot of noise when I do that? Just my headset.
Mhm.
I didn't do anyway.
Yeah,
Okay, sorry.
I
usually-
make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Mark. Any second?
Seconded.
Everyone
Malcolm.
seconded it.
Malcolm seconded it.
Okay, thank you. You guys have the same initials, MC. So Malcolm, do you vote to adjourn?
I do.
Okay, Mark Sandrone,
Yes, indeed.
Peter McNamee,
Yes.
thank you, Joe Morgan,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So we are officially adjourned. I was, excuse me, sorry for my dry throat this tonight, and despite that, my bit of wordiness tonight. So sorry about that. But well, good night to you all. Thanks once again for your work and participation. It's much appreciated by myself and the city. So have a good night.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good
Good
night.
night, Commissioners.
Good night.